So now we get to the fun part. We're going to talk in this video about fall-offs. Now, fall-offs in Moto are really fun. They're one of the things that makes modeling in Moto a really unique and unusual experience. It's not like anything else that's out there, to my knowledge. Let's go to the right view for a second. And I want to switch to wireframe view so that we can see the underlay. I'm going to go up to the top left of the viewport and drop down this second drop down from the left and head to wireframe mode. Now in future I'm going to access that using the Control 2 pie menu and going straight up to wireframe mode. I do that with my my little finger on the control key and then reach my middle finger, i.e. flip the bird right up to the number 2 to get here and then let go to change modes. It's a little bit of an awkward key shortcut, but I don't use it that often, and it's actually more convenient than heading up to the top left, I think. Anyway, whatever you want. So now we want to move this stuff so that we're matching the underlying shape. And before we go any further, I want to mention something about selecting things in Moto. When you're in shaded mode, by default, your middle mouse button will select through the model. It's going to select as in X-ray mode. Everything that is inside of your lasso will be selected. Whereas if you use the right mouse button, it's only going to select visible polys, the polys that are facing you. And that is the default behavior for GL mode. Now if you go to wireframe mode, those defaults are reversed. So middle mouse will now select only the visible polys in the front, and right mouse will select the X-ray mode. Now, to some people, that makes logical sense. To me, I find that really frustrating and confusing. I'd prefer for the mouse to behave the same way, regardless of what view mode I'm in. So if you go to your preferences and look under the input section under selection, there is a checkbox for ignore shading style. You can use that if you like. I leave it enabled. That way my right and middle mouse buttons always do the same thing regardless of shading style. Okay, so I'm going to go back to my right view, and from here we can actually start working with our fall-offs. Now I'd like to change this hood first of all so that the front of the hood goes down following the shape of the car, of course. So I could then grab a bunch of these polys and move them down just a little bit. Grab this set now and move those down just a little bit, and grab these ones and move them down just a little bit. And obviously that is a ridiculous and frustrating waste of time. Not to mention being very inaccurate, right? One of the big problems with doing it this way is not only is it boring and repetitive, it's also very inaccurate, so that the result is a lumpy hood. It's never going to be perfect. I can't eyeball it and have it be absolutely pristine and get those gorgeous highlights that you expect to get on a model of a car. So instead of all that, I'm going to undo all that and come back. And instead, we're going to use what's called a fall-off operation. A fall-off is accessed right up here at the top of the window in the modes bar. We have the fall-offs drop-down, and inside there we have lots of different kinds of fall-offs. But ultimately, we're mainly going to use only a couple of them. The first one is the most simple. That is the linear fall-off, and it's the one that I use by far the most often. If I drag from back to front on the car here, that's going to create what's known as a fall-off or an attenuation of any tool that I use from here on out. So if I grab the Move tool now and move any selection, in this case we're moving everything because nothing is selected, then it's only going to move the stuff to the left of the fall-off, right? Stuff to the right of this fall-off isn't getting moved at all, whereas stuff to the left side of the fall-off is getting moved one-to-one with what I do with my mouse. Everything in between is attenuated, which makes this a very powerful tool. So if I go to my Scale tool now, for example, scale this down, I'm able to scale it such that we're scaling the front as the most, we're scaling the back really not at all, and we can move the fall-off in real time. Whoops. We can move the fall-off by dragging the center of it, move that in real time, and see the thing adjust as we go. Very, very powerful stuff. Now, once I've got this complete and I know that the front of this matches, I'll hit Escape to drop the tool and Escape to drop the fall-off. Now let's undo all of that. I'm going to go back and let's do this all again from scratch. Make sure you hit Escape so that there's nothing listed here in the tool properties. Let's head up to our fall-offs, linear. Drag where you want the fall-off to be. Run the scale tool by hitting R in my case, or head to the toolbar. And look in our tool properties. Notice that our tool properties are a little bit longer than normal. We have our transform tool properties here for the scale tool, and we have the fall off properties down below. These control the actual fall off, the shape of the fall off, its attenuation type, all that kind of stuff. And now if I scale, there we go. We can actually use this fall off. And when we hit escape, look over here in the tool properties. Escape drops the tool, but the fall off stays active. Now we can hit escape to drop the fall off, and now we're back to normal. Okay, so keep that in mind. You can use the same fall off multiple times if you just only hit escape once. Or you can hit escape twice to drop the fall off as well. Now we're going to middle mouse select this part so that we're only working with these polys down here. So we move them, we're only moving those, but we want to do that with a fall off. So let's go to fall off, linear, drag that out, and then pull these down until they sort of match the bottom. Now, the problem with this one is that the bottom here looks like it's kind of arced. It's not really straight. The top of this needs to be a ruled surface. I can imagine that they created this hood on a roll, so they were rolling the top of this to be just a single piece of metal that's bent. This bottom piece, though, I believe this is a stamped piece of metal because it's got compound curvature on it. So we actually need for this to be arced. We can do that by changing the shape preset of our linear fall off. Let's go to our shape preset here and change that to ease in. And notice what this is doing. It's kind of bending the fall off a little bit as it goes. And look, it's changed the shape of our perfect purple cone here as well to show us what it's going to do. It's getting more action earlier, as you move over. So there we go. We'll do something like that to where it sort of matches. That looks pretty good. Hit escape to drop the tool, and escape to drop the fall off, and escape to drop the selection. So you can see that the escape key becomes really important. You actually use it quite a bit. You can use it to drop just about anything in Moto. If things are acting weird and you're not sure what's going on, just hit escape a bunch of times, and usually that'll fix whatever the problem is. Okay, so next we want to create the back side of this, and we're going to do that using fall-offs as well. So this should be good practice. So let's go back to our fall-offs menu, linear, go back to the back here, and leaving our shape preset at ease in, I'm going to hit R for scale this down, and look, it's doing exactly what we want, but backwards. It's doing the inverse. So let's go to our shape preset and change it to ease out. That looks more like it. So I'm going to squeeze this down until it's nearly pointed in the back. Not all the way pointed, mind you, but just kind of close. W for move, and then move that down. And notice I'm using the same fall off twice because I only hit escape once. Escape once to drop the tool, escape again to drop the fall off, right? So anyway, there we go. That's done. Hit escape to drop the tool and escape to drop the fall off. Now that got us within spitting distance, but it's not perfect, right? It's not matching our underlay exactly. So let's select the bottom half of this guy, something like so. And again, we're going to use a fall off. This time we're going to use a different kind though. Let's go to fall off, radial, and then drag out a radial fall off down here because we want to move the middle of this the most this time. W for, or actually let's do R for scale. And I want to move my scale operation, so I'm actually scaling from up here instead of scaling from down here. Well, the center of an operation is controlled with what's called an action center. And that is the second thing that we're going to touch on in this video. Head up to the top left of our Moto Modes bar, and we have action centers. There are lots of kinds of them, and they are also incredibly powerful. This is another thing that's very unique about Moto, and very uniquely powerful, I should say. In automatic selection mode, it's automatically going to put the action center at the center of your selection. As you can see, it's dropped it right in the middle of the bounding box of our selected polygons. But if we click anywhere, it moves the action center. So all you have to do is click right there, and it's going to put the action center right there. Now, we'll talk about more precise ways of placing that in the future. For this operation, it really doesn't matter. And as I'm going to just scale this right up until we're matching the bottom of that drawing. And I'll then adjust my action center as needed. Looks like linear is not working for me. Let's try ease in. There we go. That looks more like it. That looks perfect. Escape to drop the tool. Escape to drop the fall off. And let's practice by doing the back side as well. Looks like the top is not quite matching either. Let's select these top polys. So I'm going to grab this bit, like so. A little pro tip for you. When you're using the lasso, notice there's always a straight line between your cursor and wherever you started, right? So I tend to start things like this wherever a straight line happens to exist. In this case, the bottom of this is pretty straight. So I'll start down here, then move my mouse up around, and then use that straight line as a guide to figure out where to select from. There we go. So let's grab our fall off again. We'll do another radial fall off. Drag it out, right like so. Make sure that we're not getting these tip. We don't want to move the tip here. We just want to move everything else. There we go. And then we'll do, in this case, W for move. And we can just move this back ever so slightly. And it actually looks like that ease in preset is working really well for us in this case. Let's hit escape to drop the tool, escape to drop the fall off, and escape to drop the selection. Now you should be starting to get this, but we're gonna keep practicing because this is an incredibly important thing. We're gonna go to the top view and do the same thing from up here. But this time we'll be using symmetry. So make sure that symmetry is on for the X, select some stuff, and make sure that you're able to select things on both sides. And kind of just double check all over the model, make sure everything seems to be working right. And as you discovered in the symmetry video, if you need to, you can always correct that symmetry using the geometry symmetry tool. Anyway, once that's up and running and you have symmetry active, let's select the front half of this car. We'll go to our fall off, enable a linear fall off, drag that exactly the way that you would expect. I like ease out in this case. That's perfect. That's exactly what we need. And then we'll go W for, let's try W for move to start with and watch what it does. So that's going to work, except notice that it's kind of crossing in the middle. That's not quite what we want. So let's try scale instead. Now scaling works, except it's actually moving the middle bits out from the middle. Actually, what we need to do is put our action center in the middle of our model so that we'll be scaling towards the center. And again, we'll do that with an action center. Instead of automatic, though, we'll just head down here to origin. That moves your action center to the origin of the model, right in the middle, so we can scale right from the center. And that's going to do us really well. Looks pretty good, actually. Let's move this action center, or move this, move the fall off, so that it gets exactly the stuff that we want. That looks pretty good. Hit escape to drop the tool, escape to drop the fall off, escape to drop the selection, and there we have it. So let's head back to the back here, do the exact same process. So we're going to just select some of these back polys, do our fall off linear, ease out once again, R for scale. Let's set our scaling to the origin once again. Just scale that in until we're really close to the middle, not quite all the way, but really darn close. Adjust our fall off as needed. And it looks like actually, oh, there we go. Just want to bulge that out some. Perfect. And it looks like actually we need to bulge out the middle of this a little bit more, right? So actually what I'm going to do is let's get that the way we want it, like so. Make sure we're scaling in far enough in the middle. Really want to get that one right. Hit escape to drop the tool, escape to drop the fall off, escape to drop the selection. And now the middle of this guy, we just want to kind of bulge the whole thing out. Notice that we're not quite wide enough right here. So I'll just go to my fall off, radial. We're going to start in the middle here where the part that we want to change. R for scale. Make sure that we are, make sure we're scaling from the origin. And just scale it out until it matches. Escape to drop the tool, escape to drop the fall off, escape to drop any selection, and there we go. That's looking pretty good. That's actually pretty perfect. Now, if we go to the right view, notice we ignored the cockpit entirely. We're going to get to that later. Don't worry, we will fix it later on. Let's go to the front view, though, and we do need to fix some things about the front view. Let's go to shaded mode. We'll go to Advanced OpenGL Shading Mode. And we're not quite matching up here on the top, are we? We're just a little bit off. So with symmetry enabled, we can manually adjust this by, of course, moving polys. And symmetry will work for us. Or we can use a falloff. Once again, let's go to our falloffs here. Let's do a radial falloff. Scale, or put it right around this area here. R for scale. And since we have our automatic action center enabled, or hopefully we do, automatic action center, then we can click right up here to scale from there, and we'll just scale those in a little bit. Notice we're just scaling the part that's inside the action center. Right up like so. Escape to drop the tool, escape to drop the fall off. And that should be getting us pretty close, folks. We're actually, yeah, that's starting to be shaped kind of like we want. Now notice I did something wrong here. I made a mistake, and I'm going to let you learn from my mistakes in this case. I scaled on all three axes at once when scaling this corner. And notice it pulled this edge back because we were scaling on the z-axis in addition to the x and y axes. So I'm going to undo all of that. We got to do it over again. Hit escape to drop the tool, escape to drop the action center. Let's go to radial action center. Do all that again. And this time, R for scale. Click where you want to scale from, and don't drag this one, the center one with the cyan circle. That's going to get you all three axes. In this case, we want the blue one off to the side. That's the x and y axes only. That will do the same thing, ostensibly, from the front view, except we know that from the perspective view, that will only be changing those two axes, whereas this one would change all three. Okay? So escape to drop all of that stuff. And we should be getting pretty close. I think the last thing that we want to do down here is just fix this front poly. Let's go to the right view in wire mode. I'm just going to R for scale, scale that down right about like so. That actually looks decent. Escape to drop the tool. And that's pretty good. Now, we will be fixing this so that it bulges the way that we want it to, but we're going to do that in a separate video. So before we go any further with our modeling, what I want you to do is take some time to practice with these fall-offs. I would definitely recommend creating a new document. Here's a great way to practice with fall-offs. Create a new document, hold the Shift key, and drop in a unit plane. Now, a unit plane by itself is not going to be that useful to you. Let me pull this up just so it's easier to see and turn off symmetry. You'll notice that this is just one big poly. So fall-offs aren't really going to do much for us here. Let's select this polygon, head over to our Mesh Edit tools, make sure we can see the bottom of those. We're going to do Subdivide, Faceted, and notice that that one poly has now become 4. Let's do that again. Again, with nothing selected, therefore everything selected. Subdivide, Faceted, we get multiplied by 4, Faceted, multiplied by 4, faceted, multiplied by 4. Now we've got a bunch of polys to work with, and this is excellent for playing with fall-offs, okay? So now, set my work plane up here so that it's on this axis. We'll go to our fall-off linear, W for move, move this, and you can see how this fall-off is working. Practice playing with these fall-offs, folks. These are one of the most powerful things in Modo. They will definitely make or break your Modo workflow. Take the time to learn and understand them. Play with whichever ones make sense, right? So the linear one is pretty obvious. We'll go to radial, which we've been using. We've basically been using it as cylindrical, right? So basically what we've been doing is this. W for move. And it's really doing a cylindrical fall-off, where it's going all the way infinitely in one axis and then within a radius on the other. But actually, a radial fall-off is more powerful than that because you can drag the middle of it to create a sphere. Now when we do our move operation, we're only working within that sphere. And you can imagine how powerful this gets when you're modeling. You can set the preset to linear or to ease out, ease in, whatever you want. And these all do different things. The one other type of fall-off that could be really useful to you is to select some stuff. And let's do, under fall-off, a soft selection fall-off. And set our radius here to, say, 100 millimeters. We'll hit W for move. Now, as we move this, it's just going to move those polys. But let's go to our soft selection fall-off and increase that radius. So as we increase the radius, we're actually increasing a radius around our current selection, and we can still use a different fall-off profile. Ease in, ease out, whatever. or ease in, ease out, or smooth. That way it eases in both directions. And you can see this is super powerful because, let's undo this, go back to the beginning. I'll select some polys in the middle here. Do a soft selection fall off, W for move, we'll move this up. Let's increase that radius so that it's quite a bit bigger. And now set this to smooth. And you can see we're actually just smoothly moving the selected polys within a given radius. Very, very cool stuff. All right, that's it, folks. Play with your fall-offs, have fun, and in the next video, we'll get back to working with our car again.